Piper, did you want to mute yourself? Hi.
Hey, Piper. How you doing? Hi, Jen.
Hello.
Make sure I got my audio where it needs to be.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, Sheridan.
Hi, all. Be right with you.
Okay. You can hear me, Jen, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. No problem about that list, Jen. I figured that maybe I had overlooked it, but
No.
not like you haven't been doing stuff. I know.
It's short and easy to do. So
Yeah, it's pretty short.
it's an easy last minute thing.
Yeah.
But still, I don't like forgetting. I do have a reminder somewhere.
Hi, Cliff. Margaret.
Here, I'm going to start the recording just so I don't interrupt you here in a minute.
Okay. All right, it's 3:00 and Elise, I know, is at an event with Jonathan's family. They are memorializing Jonathan's mom today. And so she won't join us at the work session. She told me that she'll try to be available for at least part of the town council meeting, but we do have a quorum with the rest of us. Hello, Sheridan. Okay, so I'm going to call the out the town council work session of Wednesday, October 13th, 2021 to order. This meeting will be an electronic meeting without an anchor location pursuant to my September 21st, 2021 determination, which can be seen on our website. Okay, I know we have some written comments for the town council meeting when we get there. We have 2 items on our agenda for the work session. At the most recent Council of Mayors meeting, I learned about this issue at a UFA finance. Well, I can't remember if it was the board meeting or the finance committee meeting. We talked about it in both, where I first learned of it. The UFSA, UFA are concerned with increasing pressures on firefighter salaries, and where they think that's about to come from is apparently there is very great pressure on police officer salaries right now in Salt Lake County to the tune of increases of 20%. We are already at the low end of that scale. And perhaps, I'm not sure, John may have some information about where we stand relatively, but the bottom line is, and Mike Moore can speak to this, the bottom line is I'm here to give us a heads up that I think we need to increase our marshal's office budget for personnel costs pretty substantially. John, do you want to speak to this?
If I'm muted or not.
No,
Sorry,
I hear you.
It's been a couple of years since we looked into this, so I can't really say anything statistically correct, but yeah, we're at the bottom countywide.
My understanding is that this starting salary, the low entry level salary for most of the municipalities, the various agencies in Salt Lake County are higher than our mid-career folks. So we are, I'm gonna, and Mike, you can correct me about this, but I think we're in some of our folks are around $20 and the entry level people and many of the agencies are more like 25 or 26.
Yeah, I guess I could make a couple of comments. Right now, there's a spreadsheet circulating around for law enforcement in Salt Lake County that ranks the top police officer pay down to the bottom. Currently, the Unified Police Department sitting on the bottom of that spreadsheet. Although we're in Salt Lake County, Alta wasn't even contemplated. Yeah, there's a effort right now with Salt Lake County Council and in their contract agreements with the various cities to propose police officer pay increases. And this is to combat what is happening valley-wide with officers leaving one agency to go to another that's offering higher pay. In the headlines, Salt Lake City, who's at the top of the scale, recently authorized a 30% pay increase for officers in their department. And that's created a cascading effect all through Salt Lake County law enforcement. With Salt Lake County being at the bottom of the scale, their entry level, and this is dated information, this is not current with the increases that they're proposing. Their entry level police officer pay begins at right around $22 an hour, and based on a stepped increase program, which is pretty standard for law enforcement. When you get up to the 12-year mid-career mark, pay tops out at $34 an hour. When we compare that to our officers with mid-career levels of service of 12, 13, 14 years, they're sitting around $19 to $20 per hour.
I think that some of it is that they're going to other agencies, and like in a number of difficult occupations, people are opting not to stay in those occupations at all and retiring or just leaving. I am not sure how many of our officers would be interested in working for another agency, but I do know about one who is contemplating a change in his employment. I think that, we depend on we have a marshal's office for a lot of good reasons. And we depend on them, and they're members of our community. And I think we have an obligation to treat them well. And I think that we have historically, since I've been mayor, I've tried hard to do that, but I have only had partial success, I would say. And I think that we ought to consider a mid-year increase that's a fairly substantial one. I think that one way to handle this budget-wise is we could phase some in now and some more in at the end of the fiscal year for the next fiscal year. That's one option. Another thing is we're talking here in a few minutes about parking plan, and we didn't anticipate this wasn't someplace we headed as a revenue generating plan, but we will probably generate some revenue from our parking plan, and some of that can go into the marshal's office, who, after all, are our frontline people when it comes to traffic and parking.
And Mayor, if I can add, one other comment, when we talk about the office, we are also talking about our dispatch staff, and the exact same, conditions that I just laid out exists in public safety answering points, throughout the state. Our 911 center here in Salt Lake County is, facing critical staffing shortages, turnover, and As we look at, what our dispatchers do by comparison, oftentimes, their job is more complex. They're not just manning a single, radio terminal waiting for traffic to happen on it. They're managing multiple things simultaneously. It's a very complex position, and the same pay disparity exists between Alta Central and the 911 centers.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Mike. That was when I said the Alta Marshal's office, I meant to include them, but I'm glad that we can make that explicit. So, I know that we don't like to spend money that we don't have to, but I will point out that the Alta town budget is pretty lean, and for the services that I think we get from the town, especially I think the marshal's office. A couple years ago, as part of the conversation about moving into the UFSA, Catherine Cantor and the mayor's office, the Salt Lake County mayor's office more generally, tried to press on me the idea that there were a number of sources of revenue that the town of Alta was not capturing, specifically a transient room tax, and also said that we were spending more money on our police services than we needed to because we could join UPD. I think joining UPD would certainly change the nature of our community's policing. And so I think that I wouldn't be in favor simply for that reason, even if it was at par in terms of the price, or maybe even it would have to be very substantially cheaper for me to want to do that. As it turns out, when Mike Morey and I think, John, you were with us that day.
Definitely. We couldn't afford a unified, what do they call the service area for the police department? It was a lot more expensive.
Yeah, we went down there and they looked at our wage. They just laughed at me and said, "You're not going to save any money with us. Your salary structure is too low, and we don't make the higher level contributions to their retirement system. We're in a cheaper retirement system." And then finally, I said something about a dispatch office being in Alta and it being important, given how isolated the town gets for as long as, shall we say, 60 hours at a time. And they just rolled their eyes at us, and we adjourned the meeting at that point. So we are getting a good deal, and I think we have to take care of our people. That's the bottom line. The reason I asked to talk about it today for a few minutes was, there are a couple other budget reconciliation things that need to get put on our budget for a mid-year budget amendment. And I just wanted to get the sense of the council on this question. So I invite your comments.
Well, I support our marshal's office wholeheartedly. I think we get not only personal service to the town members, whether it's residents, employees, or businesses, but also excellent service. And I've been reminded of that in the last several weeks in a very direct way. But I think we do need to support them, and I think we have been paying probably under what the level of service that we've been getting.
Okay. Thanks for that comment, Margaret. Anybody else? Cliff or Sheridan, you want to say anything about this?
I think we receive exemplary service, and probably seriously need to consider being closer to the mid or top range of what we pay. That being said, and this is difficult to separate, what we spend for our forces are by far number one budget item, right? $1 million plus annually. And so I think I don't necessarily want to have that conversation at the same time. I completely agree with the idea that we need to pay our exemplary police force very well. I also wonder, though, if we as a community should look at the moral issue involved in spending so much for our police coverage, and if some of those costs should actually be borne by others. So, but those are separate conversations. With regard to the pay structure, I am in full support of paying our marshal's office very well.
Just as to plant a seed, traditionally everywhere in the municipal world, police and fire are, well, public service, police, fire, sewer, water, those are the bases of all municipalities, and police and fire are always the big ticket items. So just, you know, we're not abnormal when it comes to like $1 million of the budget for that, because I mean, they're the people that you see every day that are going to be there to help you if something goes wrong.
I will point out that the way we do things by having the police on our budget allows essentially for the police costs to be paid by the bulk of the revenue that we collect in the general fund, which is sales tax. If we were to join UPD, they are funded based on property taxes. It goes into, they are a taxing district. Okay.
Just to follow up on John's comment, they are the people that I'm very happy to see every day when I'm in Alta. So
Indeed.
I'm more happy us
monetized.
than somebody, I shouldn't say this, it's not directly transferable to the UFSA, but you know, knowing your police on a first name basis in remote Alta is a way better thing than the whatever the Slavisa, the police district.
Well, I mean, even just getting to a emergency takes some time to know where all the buildings are in Alta, because addresses, it's much better for our dispatchers to say, you know, the Burks have a cat up a tree, go help them. Then,
Which we would.
right.
But
Then,
the service area for the
Right.
police wouldn't do that.
Then for somebody to say, I don't even know offhand, Margaret, I know where your house is, but I don't know what your address is, you know, so it might be vice versa, that the UPD would know where your address, know the address and not know where the house was. So anyway. Okay. Cliff, should we move on, or did you have something? It looked like you were about to say something a minute ago.
I'm going to boldly and bravely go on record as saying that I support our marshal's office, and I don't care who knows it.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get the data and start looking at it.
Okay, good. Thank you, everybody. Okay, now it's right on time to move to our second item on our agenda, and probably more exciting is the situation with parking. And let me start off by saying I want to thank, well, I guess two things. One is this was put upon us, that we did not seek out a change in our situation, but it has come to our doorstep because of the situation where the Alta Ski Lifts Company has a special use permit over something like 90% of the parking in the town of Alta. And they had, I'm going to try and put this in as neutral terms as I can, had allowed for people to park on their special use permitted parking, irrespective of whether they were current users of the ski area services. And they've decided to change that and make it, in general, you're going to need to be using the ski area as a patron of the ski area to park on their special use permit. Now, the special use permit arrangement is a long-standing one with the Forest Service. Even if we were to seek a change in the special use permit boundaries, that would be not only inflammatory and a difficult thing in terms of the relationship that we have of interdependence with the ski area, but it would also be a very long and drawn out process. Just to give you the sense that I did look into what would be entailed if that were to be a request from the town. some months ago, the Forest Service would have to make the decision to seek to withdraw areas from the special use permit and would very likely have to compensate the ski area for the improvements to the parking, for example, the pavement, things like that. And so the Forest Service would have to want to do it. They would have to have the budget to do it. And there would be a process for that. So that seems like a really bad alternative and an impractical one, both. And so we didn't pursue that. The Forest Service also had told me that if ground where people have historically parked were no longer in the special use permit, the Forest Service might not allow private parking on that ground in any case, because the Forest Service is not in the business, they told me, of providing parking to private residences. I don't know if that's universally true, but that is what I was told, and I didn't investigate their national policies. So we decided that the right way to do this was to try to be as coordinated and work as well as possible with the changes that the ski area was bringing to us. And we engaged the services, as you know, of a consulting firm. We used some of our funds, but most of the money was paid for. Most of this is being paid for by a grant from the Wasatch Front Regional Council. Chris or Mike or John, correct me, or Polly, correct me if I say something incorrect, please. So we want to roll this out, but I want to start off by saying that we owe a lot of thanks for decades of service in helping managing our parking to Mike Morey and the other people in the marshal's office. It is not a simple, it is a very complicated game of Tetris that Mike plays when it snows and when our community is busy. And he has done a great job. The conditions have changed, so he has to do a different kind of job now. In dealing with these changes and coming up with this proposal that we have before us today, I want to affirm and thank our staff for their intelligent, diligent, and caring approach to doing this. This has taken, it's certainly hundreds of staff member hours. I know I've spent scores of hours on this myself, let alone what Chris Cawley and Mike Morey have spent on this, plus the other members of the staff have been involved as well. So I'm going to keep reminding us, if necessary, of the intelligence, diligence, and care that has been brought by these dedicated people to this task. I'm going to share a spreadsheet that I built to help ground this discussion in actual real data. So you can see this now, I hope. Okay. I tried to make the font big enough, and you can make it bigger by your sharing menu. So the town of Alta has 200, we counted 247 spaces. We have 247 spaces if you include the Grizzly, what we call the Grizzly Gulch parking on the north side of the highway. That is in the special use permit, and the ski area has offered us that space, which minus 60 of the spaces that they'd like to use for their own, continue to use for their own purposes. That brings us a net increase of 54 over what we would have in the rest of town. The rest of town includes the north side of the highway, on the north side of the highway. The north side of the highway includes an area opposite the Snow Pine. area that the town itself actually owns. We call that North Flagstaff. And those are the places where we have 187 net parking spaces. When we asked, we ran a survey, and it's in the Fair and Piers report, and I have that pulled up, and I'm happy to go to, I do have some comments about that. We've refined some of the numbers. We did a
Can I
survey.
clarify something, Mayor?
Yes, please, Chris.
So
Yeah.
you just described that we have 187 spaces outside of the parking that takes place in a special use permit, and that's not quite accurate.
No,
187 is 60 less than the total number of spaces on the north side of the highway. The north side spaces, excluding special use permit ground, is more like 85 plus 48. It's about 120 or 130. And I think even that might be more than there really is.
Okay.
So it's, yeah, absent that 114 stalls on the special use permit, we have very, very little parking outside of the special use permit to
Yeah,
offer.
okay. Thanks, and feel free to, if I misspeak,
That's good.
I mean, I know in my head, I was thinking about the north side, but I appreciate you making that more clear. The
Mayor,
54.
may I?
Yeah, let me just say that the 54 that the ski area is making an arrangement for us to be able to use is a substantial increase over what we otherwise would have. And I think that was where Chris was headed. Okay, Mike, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And I don't want to derail the conversation. I just also wanted to include that, the ski area offering to give us management control of that North Bank parking continuing into Grizzly was predicated on the idea that the town must do it under a paid permit system.
Okay, right. I think the ski area is concerned about making, from their point of view, my understanding is they're concerned with our being coordinated with them too. You know, if they had a paid parking system and we didn't, our parking would be full first is the issue. All right, and I can show you in the Fair and Piers where some of these numbers got generated, but just to show you what the spreadsheet is, we count 38 residence units that don't have parking east of the Snow Pine. There are 4 caretaker units in some of these buildings. The businesses, Chris, this morning we talked about having that number be 18, but when I was looking at the Fair and Piers report, it said 16.
8 sounds right. Yes, for yes, 8 entities. We to some extent we backed into definitions of these really as a way to narrow the number of permits going to each of these lesser categories. And so for businesses, I think what we settled on was businesses that aren't hotels or the ski area that have a physical address in Alta, and that leaves a few nonprofits, leaves our post office, which relies on Northside parking and other parking that would be subject to the ski area program on weekends when the post office does operate, et cetera. So
there are a couple short-term rental units. Those are the ones in what was the photo house. The lodges, we surveyed the lodges, and 100 spaces need for 100 to park 100 people or 100 vehicles is smaller than what these numbers are all smaller than what we were told was needed. The problem is that the sum, as we can look in the Fair and Piers, is larger than the number that we have. And unless somebody can magically create parking spaces, which I don't think we can do, and the Forest Service has told the ski area they can't do, we have an allocation problem. And so we don't really have a choice but to figure out the best of a bad situation. The lodges, we reserved 20, one of the lodges told us, this is the Peruvian, they don't need any parking outside of their own property. We reserve 25 spaces per lodge for 100 total. Now, this is a spreadsheet that I can change if you want me to type other numbers in here. I'm happy to do that. If you want to give all of the residences, for example, 2 spaces, this is the problem, is that you have, even if you had no spaces for day users, you still don't have sufficient spaces. The reason why we converged on having 1 is per residence is because we were not really interested in being in the position of saying, you get 2, but you only get 1. So our first cut here is the 1. So that top part is about allocation. This day users, it's a good idea for us to have some number in this category because the Forest Service thinks of itself as, I think, arguably, the Forest Service ground is owned by the people of the United States, not by the people of the town of Alta. And so they have some hesitation to allowing us to simply say only, for example, residents can park in the town of Alta on Forest Service ground. I'll point out that the lodges have guests, but they also have residents in them whose address is Alta. So that's the allocation that we that Fair and Pierce has suggested, and I've typed in here. These numbers are slightly refined from what Fair and Pierce included. We've been going back and forth on what the real number is. Like many things in Alta, it's complicated and uncertain. And it was just last week when, even up until last week, we were a little unclear about just how many spaces we were talking about. In terms of financial aspect of this, this Fair and Pierce proposes a $250 annual permit. This total outside of the day users is 160. There's no consumption function here. That would generate $40,000 of revenue. I made an assumption in this spreadsheet that we would fill the day use half of the time, roughly. We can fool with those numbers too. It's just an assumption. It seemed reasonable when we were talking about it this morning. And that generates another dollar amount for a total of $77,500 of revenue in the way I built the model. The Forest Service takes a cut, so this is a number that is 96% of 77,500. And then our vendor of parking permitting services, which is Interstate, would take a cut of 50%, leading a yield of $37,000, roughly $37,000 to the town of Alta. Why $25? That's the price that the ski area is charging. Why $250? It it's about $2 a day, which seems pretty reasonable. 2, if you don't need a parking permit, if you don't need as many parking permits as you will get the option to purchase, so much the better. One of the goals is to make the parking spaces available to the people who really want them. And another goal is if we can decrease the number of cars in Alta, so much the better. So there's a bit of an incentive there to be efficient. And then finally, and most importantly, our conversation with Interstate says that they have to have a certain level of revenue or they don't want to be part of this system. And we do not have the capacity to manage this on our own. They expected us to ask to have a cost of the annual permit at $500. We believe that we are pretty close to their bottom line at this number. Okay, Mike, Chris, what have I not covered well or completely?
Mayor, I did prepare some remarks would probably be,
Oh, yeah, I was supposed to just introduce you and let you do all of
well,
that work.
that's
I
fine.
forgot.
That's
I got
fine.
carried away.
Sometimes I do better ad-libbing, and yeah, I'm not at home, or I'm not.
Would you like me to stop sharing this
No,
spreadsheet?
it's sure. I guess I thought I would just that it would be. I mean, I thought it would be helpful to present a couple of.
If you'd like, I can share the
figures.
Fair and Piers document.
I
if
think you
that's
could
helpful.
pull up page 3, the map. I just think it's always helpful to look at a map of Alta when we're talking about Alta. Page
I
3
made
has
some
the map,
annotations
so-
on here about the refinement of the numbers, but
Right.
the demand was 396, as you can see here, and the supply was 247 minus 60. And I made an annotation here after a comment from Cliff to us, is that this map is a little bit, it extends the area a little bit too far to the west. There, the Alta Lodge owns some of this property.
So yeah, thank you for pulling this up. The numbers are helpful. We have scrutinized them. We've scrutinized them pretty thoroughly. They are based to some extent on ski area assessment of stall counts, but I mean, I have seen ski area parking stall counts that date back 20 years that are pretty consistent with these numbers. And so I just again, I think it's helpful to put this up on the screen so we can all acknowledge where there is parking, where there isn't parking. And, you know, one thing that's I think is helpful here is to acknowledge that the South Flagstaff area, 135 spots, that is going to be within the ski area fee for reservation program on weekends and holidays this year. And we decided early in the process that part of the demand we might seek to serve or attempt to satisfy is some of the demand that would be displaced from this by hotel employees and other users who are not primarily ski area customers who come to Alta and need or want a place to park. So that is where some of that small business parking comes in. There's some deep powder house locations that employees park in these areas. So I just want everyone to acknowledge once again that this is not going to be parking where during weekends and holidays you can just drive up and get a spot anymore. It's going to be part of the ski area program. The Alta Lodge private property is going to by and large be part of the ski area program. So that's one helpful element. And the other is just once again to point out that the ski area special use permit includes all of the asphalt east of the Snow Pine Lodge. So some of that Snow Pine overnight area and all of the North Grizzly area, that's all in the permit. And so our arrangement to park on there is all conditioned on, really it's conditioned on a memorandum of understanding with the ski area that we haven't even finalized yet. So we're still working on securing the right to offer parking in that area to our residents and to other Alta stakeholders who are not solely ski area customers. So that's one thing that I thought would be helpful to show. And I guess the other page that I was going to pull up was page 7. That's where we have the permit breakdown. Mary, you just showed your spreadsheet that I think is may have done the trick, but I was just going to walk through some of these numbers.
Yeah,
47.
This is a little different now. Yeah.
Yes, 47 residents. Since somebody pointed out to me in a comment that there's 36 residential properties in East Alta, we'll say East Grizzly, or West Grizzly rather, or Emma Heights as it's also known. Grizzly Gulch, and Albion Basin. We made the determination that a couple of those properties have essentially apartments in them, so we bumped up the number to 38. But and what I think happened here was that there was a remainder of spots. Once we added up all of the other numbers, we came to 36 or 38 residential permits, and then the remainder, in order to get to 247, went into the residential column. So that's what that discrepancy is about. Early in this project, we had to decide, or maybe we didn't decide explicitly whether this is parking that's been open to the general public. Northside parking historically has been available to anybody who needs a place to park overnight that and they can't find one on site at their property, on site at the hotel they're staying at. And so it's been available first come, first serve on that basis. And what we're looking at here is a system that heavily favors really people who don't have parking on their properties sufficient to meet their needs. And so that was a decision that we, again, I don't know if we made it explicitly to make it harder to make this parking less available to folks in West Delta, let's say. But one opportunity we've tried to build in is for folks in West Delta who, for the most part, have parking on site, to, if they have additional needs and a space, one of these day use spaces is available, they can come up and get a spot there. So yeah, I thought that this was a helpful exhibit, but I do think, Mayor, that for the purpose of this conversation about is the proposal the right or not the right arrangement, I think that your spreadsheet that we can manipulate is probably a better way to think about this.
I think that I just want to emphasize something that Chris, you just said, which is having a pool in this single day permit allows for not just people who have other parking, like you just said. For example, I'm supposed to, when we're busy at Christmas, I'm entitled to one space at the Blackjack, but I may have, a second person want to come and visit me. So it allows for that. And it also allows for the homeowners in East Alta who otherwise have one spot under this scenario to have an opportunity potentially to have more than one on a as needed basis or as available basis. Mike, did you want to say anything before we go back to my spreadsheet maybe, or open it up?
Well, I guess I just want to, excuse me, reiterate what you've already said several times is, from the beginning, once we gained an understanding about how much real estate the town would actually be able to manage, it was, and it continues to be, painfully clear that we do not have enough room to meet the parking demands that people want, and possibly the parking that people need. We've got a commuting workforce, we have residents, and we've got other, activities that go on in our town that require parking. And we've got a very small area to offer at this point.
I'll say something about the procedure that we're thinking about. We don't have all the blocks in place yet, but we need an MOU with the ski area. We need an MOU probably with the Alta Lodge, because we have an existing arrangement about public parking on their private ground that we would need to amend, at least temporarily. And we've talked to the Alta Lodge about that a little bit. We would need a contract with the vendor of the parking services, and we need a process of essentially what we are contemplating making available to those categories of users is the opportunity. We're going to essentially, I don't know what the right word is. We're going to allocate an option to purchase a permit to those users. And the option will have an expiration date. And if the option is not exercised, then what that means is that that particular user doesn't perceive a need to have whatever that option allows. And then whatever is left, we're going to have to reconsider what to do about that. So I don't want to call out any particular facility, but imagine we have, lodge X, and they are allocated 25 options. They have the option to purchase up to 25 permits, but they may decide not to exercise that option and may only buy 10. And that means that there are 15 permits that are still available to other users. We don't think that we should allow that lodge to contemplate that purchase of such a scarce resource throughout the whole winter. So we're going to say, you got to make a decision by such and such a date, and then we'll see what we have left over, if any, and then we will reconsider if there are other lodges that want to purchase more, or if there are residents who want to purchase more, or there's a perception that we need more in the day parking, then we'll reconsider what to do with that residual. I don't think that's going to be, given the scarcity of parking spaces, my guess is they're going to get snapped up pretty quickly, but we need to have a backup plan. The other concern that we've talked about quite a bit is a process that does not allow people to take their permits and sell them, and on a secondary market. If we're going down that path, we ought to just run an auction, it seems to me. I don't know that it's legal. It's not permitted under the ordinance we passed last month, by my understanding, in any case. But even if our ordinance didn't prohibit it, I don't know if it's legal under any other code to take what is essentially a scarce public resource and allow its resale, to allocate. I don't think it's right, and it may not even be legal, to allocate it to individuals for resale and private profit. That just doesn't seem like the right way to go. So we need a way to make sure that that doesn't happen.
And Mayor, if I could add, one of the reasons it's so important that we get our relationship and contract finalized with Interstate is because we need to explore the interchangeability of a permit. And an example might be that there's a cabin in the basin that's owned by more than one family. And so one weekend, family drives this car to it, and the next weekend, a separate car comes up to use the property. So we want to explore the ability that Interstate might have to, for that family to call Interstate and say, okay, we want to move this license plate into the system for the weekend, and
Right.
add some utility to it to better help, our homeowners.
Well, one thing we haven't said is something about the technology. It is a license plate number scanning technology. It's not like a card in your window or a sticker on your car. And so it's tied to an individual vehicle. And we do want to allow families to, if somebody is using if the children are coming for the weekend and they're going to use the house, we want to accommodate that on the one hand, but we need a system where we are not creating an opportunity for a secondary market on the other. And so there's a tension between those two, the convenience of the transferability and the prevention of a secondary market. And so we haven't worked that out yet. That's still, we've been, I think we spent a lot of time counting parking spaces. All right. Let me see we've got about 10 minutes left from that presentation. So what comments or questions do the council members have? for the staff.
Thank you to everyone for everyone's hard work. I can't imagine trying to grapple with all the moving parts of this. I'm curious how you've considered the residents who are employees who also are Alta Pass holders, who therefore will be allocated a certain number of parking spots based on being pass holders.
So they won't have, all they would have access to via their season pass is the opportunity to park for the day in ski area parking lots.
Okay.
So that doesn't, the season pass doesn't get a resident employee an overnight spot. At least we haven't, I mean, we don't have enough spots to offer,
Sure,
offer it
no.
that way. But, and I
It
would,
just is an X factor.
I would add
in the
that
mix. So-
we, in the lodge allocation formula, I mean, we asked hotels a lot of questions about how many guest rooms you have, how many employees work for you, how many offsite, how many cars associated with your business, resident employee cars, commuting employee cars, guest cars, fleet vehicles park off-site, off of your own private property at peak times or various times throughout a given day, week, the winter, what have you. And so those numbers, that 25 per each of these 4 lodges that need offsite parking, we intend for that to be the permits that would be available to resident employees and spots that could, or permits that could be used for a guest car or whatever other vehicles the hotels need to park offsite.
I'll say this, that as it turns out, this kind of problem is in my wheelhouse because it's been, since I was a graduate student, I've been studying different methods for allocating scarce resources. And one of the things you can do is you can try to base it on need. And our survey asked a number of need questions. And we got way down into those weeds, looking at number of rooms, number of employees per room, number of guests plus number of employees. And we got to the point where we thought, this is going to come, all this is going to do is lead to a lot of conflict if we go down this path. And so what we decided was, there's 4 lodges, let's give them 25 spaces each, let them manage their own businesses. Some of the lodges are, as an economist would say, better endowed with private property. The Alta Lodge in particular, or the Peruvian, they have parking. They were, for whatever reason, whether it was foresight, good luck, whatever it was, they happen to own that property. And so they have an advantage. So if the Alta Lodge chooses to exercise its option for 25 spaces, they will have 25 spaces in addition to the 20 something that they have in their own private property. Cliff.
There, let me add a point of information and then a question. As a point of information, this is secondhand, so I don't. It's not coming from me in any capacity, but I understood from Mike Mon that the Canyon Amp Pass that most of the lodge employees purchase would not have a parking permit connected with it at all, even for day use. I'd be happy to be corrected on that, but I just want to identify that issue. That's where I understand things are. Chris, were you going to offer something on that?
No, but that just totally changes my concept of what the demand for parking is going to be, because I've assumed that Deep Powder House employees or Gold Miner's Daughter employees who park at the Wildcat lot, for instance, when they drive up to work from the valley, could make a reservation to park in the Wildcat lot. But if they can't, they can, it's just going to cost them $25. So
the the big one there is just to identify the issue and make sure we run that down. I don't have anything definitive on that, but that's an issue. Another one that I think maybe we want to look at correcting in accordance with the intent of the allocation to the lodges. And again, let me say this while I've got your ear. Again, I have a conflict of interest because I work for Alta Lodge. So let me state that for the record. With respect to the parking passes that would be allocated to lodges, partly for lodge guests, overnight guests, and then also partly for lodge employees who are Alta residents, park here overnight. One thing we might want to consider is, for example, if one of the lodges were to purchase a number of permits for $250 each, that in fact the town would allow the lodge to transfer that pass to an employee as long as that person is a bona fide employee. That has an economic benefit if the lodge were to elect to just have the employee pay the cost of that pass, then that puts the incentives maybe where they belong. And so we don't want to have, I don't think we would want to have that kind of transfer run afoul of the ordinance.
No, that's right, Cliff. I think that all along we thought of the 25 as being allocated to employees and guests at the lodge's discretion. Cliff, Mike, you have any disagreement with what I just said? I do think that's how we've been talking about. Yeah, okay.
If I could weigh in, I'm interested in understanding some of the resident numbers. Again, the Fair and Peers report had 47 and it's now 38 in your current discussion. And as I look at just in the Grizzly area, it's not residences from this report, it's residential units. And so if there are, for example, residences where there's multiple apartments, how is that allocated? Because I come up with a number of 40, with 15 being in Grizzly, 21 in the Basin, and then the 4 additional units. And I'm concerned that if the lodge has both 25 for the lodge and the lodge also has residential employees, are they essentially counting those residential employees in a residence as an additional number of people? And the same thing with the lift company or other businesses that might have residential employees. Where are those residential employees counted? Are they counted as residents, or are they counted against or in the allocation of the business itself?
Chris, do you want to jump on that one? We took a hard look at that, in particular, you've got, for example, the big house, which there's a number of people from the Alta Lodge are associated with, so, is this employee housing? Is it a private home? Is it, business and all that? And so the numbers that Chris, Colley, and Fair and Pierce worked really hard on, I think dissected that down to a way where it could be manageable. And Chris, can you talk about the details of that?
Well,
hot potato.
I will acknowledge that, yes, the big house and the little house are, I guess they're employee housing technically. And yes, there are scary employees who live in Grizzly Gulch. There are employees who live, in some of these properties that don't have on-site parking in the winter and that have historically used north side parking or town managed parking. And we did acknowledge, so the when the Alta Lodge filled out the survey, they did not account for the big house and the little house, and that And then probably just by virtue of the way we distributed the survey to, really there's a marshal's office contact list that I think, Margaret, you helped us supplement. Folks responded on behalf of the little house and the big house as residents. And they are residents. Many of them are Alta residents. So the big house and the little house appear in the residential count. We do acknowledge that the big house has 2 apartments essentially, and one, at least to my knowledge, another single family home type residential property in the Grizzly Gulch area has 2 apartments. So we went from 36, residential structures in East Alta and bumped it up to 38. So if there are 2 more,
Well, we want to get the number right,
Yeah.
for sure. And I'm wondering, are the 2 that you could get to 2 more if you included the caretakers units in the West Grizzly, which we put separately.
Well, I know that there's one of the homes in Grizzly you're saying has 2 apartments. There's one over from me that actually has 3 different apartments, 3 different levels. So that's part of what I'm talking about, is those kinds of things. I mean, I'd be happy to work more into the weeds with you on it, but that was my overall question, was whether these people were considered resident employees of the business that they're working for, or whether they were accounted for in the residence list, so that we weren't double counting them, or on the converse, not counting them at all.
Well,
They
right,
were-
right.
yeah, they weren't counted as,
Well, we aren't counting employees under this scheme. We were headed, this is part of why that scheme seemed too complicated. So now it's up to the lodge to decide what to do with their 25. Does it go to guests or people living in the lodge?
And I'll
But
jump
it's-
to part 2 of your question, if I could. I expect that the Alta Ski Lift overnight parking employees, ALFs, for example, I expect that is one of the reasons why their lift company is retaining 60 spaces, so that there will be
Yeah, that's what
room
they've said.
for those employees and their other needs.
That's right.
And I know we're almost out of time, but I just wanted to quickly interject that employees, if they are not going to be extended when they buy their season passes, the same parking privileges that anyone who buys a parking pass, that's startling to me, in that they pay the same amount of money that anyone pays for their pass. So to strip that off the pass seems questionable.
It's,
Well, actually, the employees have the ability to buy a regular Alta ski pass, just like any other member of the public.
Okay, so that actually, I think, is a matter for the ski area to make a decision about in any case. So unless we're going to try and nationalize the ski area, I don't think it's a matter of the town's government. So I'd like to call the work session done, if that's good, since we're a minute past 4. And do you guys, would you like to take a minute like we've been doing, or do you want to just get right into the council meeting? I'm always happy to just take a minute,
Let's
Refill
take a
my-
minute.
refill my glass of water. Thank you.
Take a minute.
Council.
Yay.
Okay, I'll be right back. 1 or 2 minutes.
Del Draper, I'm doing a sound check for you. I've enabled you to speak if you want to try. Sounds like you'll have to call back in on a phone number. I'll try and recognize that.
Just unmuted. Was that the problem?
Nope, that's great. There you go.
Okay, okay, thanks, Jen.
You're welcome. Bodie, in preparation for the agenda, I'm trying to promote you into being a panelist if you want to accept that, if you're paying attention. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like, I don't know if Sheridan is back. Margaret Cliff is here. As I said before, Elise may come in a little bit later if she becomes available. So, oh, hi Sheridan, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order and refer to my declaration about electronic meetings. So I'm calling to order the Alta Town Council meeting of Wednesday, October 13th, 2021. Our first order of business on our agenda is that I'd like to introduce to the council 3 people who have expressed some interest in filling what will soon be a planning commission vacancy. As everybody on this call, I think, is well aware, we have an election coming up, and the one candidate for mayor is currently a planning commission member. And so I'm going to ask the 3 people who have, we've distributed their resumes and they have expressed some interest in being on the planning commission. The process is that I am to get the advice of the planning commission. I've sought that, and also to get the advice and then the consent of the town council. I'm not asking for your either one right now. I just want to introduce the people who I've been considering appointing, and then over the next couple of weeks, get your advice. And we'll be back later at another town council meeting to look for your consent. I'm excited that we have 3 people who are interested, and we have 3 people who are interested who are members of, shall I say, a younger generation. I'm pretty happy about that because I think we need to make sure that that the people who are involved in the town government are not just people of a certain age, shall I say. I'm going to call on them in the order in which I know I heard about their interest. So the first of those is Bodie John. So Bodie, if you could just introduce yourself and say a couple of words about why you would like to be appointed to the Planning Commission, that would be great.
All right, thanks, Harris. Can everyone hear me?
We
All
can.
right, I'm Bodie John. I am 26 years old. I have lived in Alta for just going on 7 years now, on the bypass road, and I would just like to do all that I can to serve this town that I've loved for so long and just be a part of it, more involved.
And I'll note that Bodie ran for town council at our previous election, and I think you garnered something like 27 votes, as a matter of fact, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bodie. The next person is Maren Askins. If you could say something about who you are and why you would be like to be appointed, Maren, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Maren Askins. I'm coming on 10 years living and working in Alta. I've been at the Alta Lodge since 2012. I've been the general manager for the past 3 years, and for the past 6 years, I'm one of those troublesome big house residents, if you were in the parking meeting. I came out here for the skiing. I stayed for the people and my career here, and I would be honored to have the privilege to serve this town, serve this community, and be on the Planning Commission, the land use really interests me. And I would do it on behalf of the town, what's best for the town, not necessarily as a business or a resident here. And yeah, I'm very grateful for the opportunity and thank you so much.
Thanks, Maren. And then the third person is Rebecca Hall. If you could say something about yourself, Rebecca, and why you'd like to be on the Planning Commission.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Rebecca. I've been living in Alta for 4 years now, ever since I married my husband, John, in 2018. But I've been out skiing and enjoying recreating at Alta since 2007, after I graduated college with biology and math degrees. So have a knack or passion for science and data. I would love to be on the Planning Commission. I've been listening to what's going on, and I love the idea of the Dark Sky project. I love that they're talking with environmentalists about what we need to do environmentally up here in Alta and how that can be sustainable for years to come. I think that I'm a great listener. Again, yeah, like Mayor was saying, that some young, fresh ideas I can bring to the table. So yeah, I'm just really looking forward to working for the town more. Definitely had an interest in that over the last couple of years. So I'd like to be more involved with the town and hopefully do that through the Planning Commission. So.
Thanks, Rebecca. We really, all I was hoping to do was have these three people kindly introduce themselves, which they've done. We've got this on the agenda until 4:20. Does any of the town council members or the staff want to have a conversation, or should we just leave it at that for now and go forward by looking at the resumes and having offline conversations at your discretion? All right, I'm going to thank all three.
Sorry, didn't have a chance to jump in there.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. Could you just talk about why you feel that it's within your purview to appoint this member, Mayor?
Because there's going to be a vacancy on the Planning Commission.
But that vacancy doesn't happen until both you are out of office and someone else leaves that vacancy. So that happens after your tenure.
Well, actually, it happens when the town council, when I appoint and the town council confirms. And that's been true for 20 months or so, but or 22 months.
I guess I don't understand that aspect of it.
Well, I would refer you back to the minutes of our meeting, and I think it was December of 2019.
So the only seat that might become available should Roger become confirmed mayor in January doesn't happen until January. And his term doesn't expire for at least 2 or 3 years.
His term
So I'm just curious.
His term did expire. And he's been occupying the position in the absence of an appointment that got confirmed. And that was the understanding 2 years ago, roughly 2 years ago.
Well, I thought the ordinance means if he is confirmed with the approval of the council, then he has a 5-year term.
Yeah, that's not the way that 5-year term was over. Polly, do you want to weigh in on this conversation?
Right. The way that the statute reads is that when someone's appointment is up, then the mayor has the ability to appoint, but can only appoint with advice and consent of the council. That didn't happen. It was agreed that Roger would remain in his position until he resigns. And so he's not sitting in he was not confirmed by the council. He was never appointed by the mayor. He just continued on in his seat and has been, a great planning commissioner, has been participating and continuing on in his role as planning commissioner.
Yeah, I mean, and I appreciate his service. I just know that he's going to get elected mayor and he can't serve both. So I think that I would like the opportunity to complete an appointment that didn't get completed.
This still seems suspect to me. This process seems suspect to me, as it did initially when you asked for Roger's resignation. And again, so this is bringing up all of these issues, but the same issues seem in place. Why is this happening this way?
I think you've asked that question. I think I've answered it, Sheridan. It's because he's going to be elected mayor. If he's not elected mayor next month, then I suppose that all bets are off for this, and he could remain as a planning commission member. But then I'm not sure what happens. That strikes me as exceedingly unlikely, since he'll be elected mayor with only one vote, and I'm pretty sure I can count more than one vote already.
But it just seems, it was my understanding actually that when Roger retained his seat as the planning commissioner, that the statute was written such that then he has a 5-year term automatically.
It actually doesn't say it that way. It's a little convoluted the way your statute reads, and it's something that I would like to see us clean up so that you don't have this this duality in it. But it doesn't say that it starts a new appointment. It just says that the person shall remain until he or she resigns.
Or serves their 5-year term, right? I mean,
No.
This is an accurate legal interpretation of the statute.
No, that part, I mean, he remains, and I'll pull up the statute right now. But he was not reappointed for another 5-year term. So he's not sitting on a 5-year appointment. He is there until he resigns or no longer wishes to serve. Same thing.
Not to be small about it and not to be pedantic, but it, again, with regard to process, based on my understanding of the statute, it seemed that Roger did, once no other appointee was approved and confirmed by the council, have a 5-year term to fill. And the only reason that I'm pushing this is that I'm not comfortable with the precedent that this seems to be setting. This, as I wasn't then, as I'm not now.
Well,
So-
we'll put it on the agenda for a future meeting, and you can object at that time.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going, Chris?
It's good, John. Hey, I just figured I could basically step away from this.
Chris,
Oh.
you're on. You're still.
I
not
just
muted.
I just muted him. Go ahead, Cliff.
I'll just take a minute of the time that we have left to say I'm familiar with what happened back in December and January of 19 and 20. I have read the ordinance. Harris Sondak is our mayor for another 2.5 months, and I fully support the authority of the mayor to appoint a member of the planning commission with the advice and consent of the town council.
I too have read the ordinance and I disagree with those statements as well. So this sounds like we are heading down a path where we may need to get some other legal opinion on it. But in reading the ordinance, it seems to me you have to read it as legislative history in its entirety. You can't read one section without reading the other. And the section doesn't talk about reappointment at the end of a commissioner's term, but continuing on for an additional 5 years. But we can have this discussion another time.
Yeah, I mean, I have it up right now, just so you all know. It's 10.4.3. It says members of the planning commission shall serve terms of 5 years and may serve consecutive terms until at the end of a 5-year term, the mayor appoints a successor planning commission member to that position. Members shall continue to serve until their successors are appointed. If the mayor does not reappoint a new planning commissioner member at the end of a planning commissioner member's 5-year term, that planning commission member shall continue to serve unless such planning commission member elects to step down. The mayor shall appoint new planning commissioner members to fill vacancies that might arise. So that's the actual terminology of your code. It's not the best written, but that's what you've got.
Yeah, and I
So
would
it's-
refer us to our, the minutes of those meetings as well, because we did come to an understanding together at that time. But it's, I do think we can leave it for another day. I wanted to introduce the people who I was considering appointing and asking for the commission, the town council's confirmation. Okay, thank you, Maren, Rebecca, and Bodie. I'll be in touch. All right, the next item on our agenda is citizen input, and I know that we have some, and I won't be surprised if we go a little bit longer than the 10 minutes, but we'd like you to keep your remarks to 2 minutes or less. And I would like to request, I hope that the people who are going to comment on parking, which is what I am expecting people to want to comment on mostly, will have been present for the discussion during the work session. And if they weren't, I will remind everybody that I have no doubt that the work that has been done, as I said, with intelligence, diligence, and care. Jen?
Yeah, Piper, do you first want to report on the written comments that were received?
The written comments have been posted, I believe, Jen, 4 of them.
Yes, I wasn't sure if you were going to reflect on them or.
Well, there was one, I think those can stand as part of the record and people can check those. But I think that there was one that came in after, but let me just check that, sorry.
Okay.
Dale Draper's, I can't remember if that was part of the.
He's on my list. He's on my list, so that's okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, Dale Draper's, if I could read that out loud, or do you want to have him?
I think you should only read it out loud if you're going to read them all out loud.
Okay, then I will not do that, and they are on the record on the website.
Okay, sounds good. So I did reach out to folks. I know of a handful of individuals that definitely want to speak. I'm going to call on them first, and then I'm going to go through the rest of the folks that are on the meeting and just check in with you. I will say, Mayor, that because I've been paying attention to all of the attendees and panelists, that pretty much everybody joined this meeting right at the beginning. So I would suspect that all of these people making comments were part of the work session. So first off on my list, Dawn Page, I have enabled you the ability to speak if you want to test your mic.
Yes, can you hear me, Jen?
I can, thank you.
Okay. I will make one quick comment about the parking, and I just want to thank everybody for their hard work. I know this isn't an easy process, and there's no winning in any of this game we're having to play this year. But mostly I wanted to speak and say a huge thank you to our police officers. Chris and I, a week ago, came upon an intruder in our cabin. And I just want to say thank you so much to Mike Morey and his team and the professionalism that they showed and the care and compassion for us and the handling of the situation. It was scary. It's still fresh in our minds, but I just want them to know we know how hard they work, and you can all know that your officers are there and they'll be there as quickly as they can to help you in any time of need. And there's not enough thank yous we can say to Mike and his team, but we just wanted to express those and just thanks so much to our whole police force.
Thanks.
Thank
Dawn.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Don, and thank you to Mike and all of your people.
Hope you're okay, Don.
Thank you, Don.
Dan Kettner, I believe you called in on a phone line because I double checked the phone number.
Dan, we're on a computer.
You are. Okay. You're signed in as both. Okay. It looks like, anyways, Adrian or Dan, go ahead.
Hello, Dan Kettner here from Alta Chalets. And I wanted to talk about the Alta Resort Shuttle that I work with and I sponsor. It starts out this summer, Margaret Burke started a conversation about the need for a nighttime shuttle in town. And when I heard about this idea, I was immediately on board. I think it's a great idea. First of all, a night shuttle will eliminate the need for most of the needs for guests to rent cars. And these are guests that could be staying at lodges or at any of the properties in the bypass road. I mean, we currently have airport shuttle, food stocking, daytime town shuttles in place. And now guests can call for a ride around town until 10 o'clock at night. So a reduction in renter cars in the canyon is very important to me, as I'm sure it is to most of you. We agreed that many of the guests will want to go shopping at Snowbird for dining, and they want to go down to Snowbird at night for food stocking at Grits and of course the liquor store. So with this in mind, I met with Levi Thorne, the director of lodging at Snowbird, and he liked the idea of people coming to Snowbird to spend money, but he wasn't open to joining in an effort for funding this shuttle. And that's what the biggest thing has been, where do you get this money? I talked to Tom Snyder, who operates the daytime shuttle, and he provided me with some numbers. It's going to be $20,000 for a shuttle that'll run from 6 at night till 10 at night from December 20th to March 31st. And then I kept trying to find ways to fund it, but it it didn't really come up with any ways that didn't involve the guests paying for most of it, charging the guests to be driven around town. Just on Monday, you may know my wife, Adrian Ruderman, is on the board for Visit Salt Lake, and she was in a meeting with Caitlin Eckelson, who is the president and CEO of Visit Salt Lake.
Dan, if you could try and wrap it up in the next 30 seconds, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
I'll do it right now. So the end product is Visit Salt Lake is willing to kick in $25,000 toward the shuttle at Alta. They'll pay $20,000 for a night shuttle, $5,000 can go toward the day shuttle. And Caitlin is talking to Tom Snyder right now about how she's also going to pay to wrap the van. And that'll say, sponsored by Alta Ski Lifts, the town of Alta, and Visit Salt Lake. So I'll be sending you a written proposal for this, council members and the mayor, next week. So I hope this is good news.
That's great news, Dan. Thanks so much. And we'll look forward to that information.
Right.
Thanks, Dan.
Looks like the next person is not on. So Chris, let's see here. Sorry, the order jumps around on me. Dominic Malamo. I had you and Crystal. Did you want to make any comments today?
No, I think we're okay for now.
Okay, thank you. Ellen Rossi, I have you on here twice, so I'm gonna prompt one of you to speak. Did you want to make a comment, Ellen? Here, I'll do both because you may have shared your login. Did you
No,
want
I
to-
registered to speak, so I'm all set.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to make sure. Mike Weems, let me find you. I know I saw you on here. There we go. I know you were questioning.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. First, thanks again, everyone, for the work you've done on the parking situation. Looks like a pretty equitable arrangement. I'm a cabin owner up in the basin, and I just wanted to emphasize that the idea of transferability is going to be, I think, fairly important. We're a cabin that has multiple owners as well as adult family members, and so being able to move this permit from car to car is going to be something that's important to us. Secondarily, it looks like the assumptions in the parking analysis assume that every permit would be used every day. And at least up in our part of the basin, even on snow weekends, there are a lot of cabins that aren't in use. So I don't know if you can leverage that to your advantage and put some assumptions of 70% usage or something for the cabin owners versus 100% usage. Certainly there will be weekends when more people than that type of assumption imagines will actually be up there, and that could create a problem, but it may be an opportunity for you guys to free up some more passes. Anyway, thanks again.
Thanks, Mike, for pointing that out. I will say that we discussed the idea of like 1.5 times the number of residences for that allocation category, and we were worried about what happens when they are too few. But you make a good point about the frequency of use. Thank you.
Bob Pruitt, I wasn't sure if you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. One thing about the Alta ski lift permit boundary, it has increased over time. And when that increase was done, there was no environmental or sociological impact study about that expansion onto parking, particularly in the Grizzly Gulch area where the cabin owners park. We're kind of restricted there because of avalanche conditions. And we're there before the ski area permit took over the area. And everybody kind of seems like it's Forest Service and Alta ski lifts are king. But if you look at their special use permit, it's subject to valid existing rights. And so everybody that's been parking there since the 70s has some sort of right to park there as a valid existing right. There was no permit required for it, but it is. And so I think that that's an aspect that should be looked at in trying to allocate parking spaces. Thanks. Good job. I know it's a lot of work and there's not enough parking, but I just think that the company line that Alta's King ignores the special use permit provision that says their permit is subject to valid existing rights. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Del Draper, I'm going to call on you next.
Thanks, Jen.
Yep.
I was quite confused by parts of this memorandum on parking, and I'm less confused now, I believe, having listened to the work session. I thought what you were doing was allocating the north side, which is the rare overnight parking stalls. And so I'm confused by page 2 of the memo where it says, you know, there's only 247 spaces, but if you consider backcountry skier demand, there's even more demand. And I was confused by on the map on the next page showing 40 stalls on the Wildcat ramp where there really has never been overnight parking. And I now understand there's really kind of two programs here. There is some sort of desire to serve the backcountry skiers. And to the extent you do that, you know, I have no problem with $25 a day. So backcountry skier will come up and 5 days a week, I doubt anybody would buy an Alta $25 pass so they can park in the Alta ski lift slot for free when they go backcountry skiing. But that makes a little bit more sense. I think for residents, I object to the fees, and I sent some of those objections through in a letter, which I hope you take the time to read. I won't reiterate those now. But I think the main problem I have is that the system that's designed really does not reflect the way most cabin users use their cabins. I go up quite infrequently during the winter. And when I go, we often have more than one car. And I think this is probably true with a lot of people. The cabins sit vacant a lot of the time. And yet when they go, they might have guests joining them and have several cars. So I will buy a permit, whatever you do with the fee, I will buy a permit. But I can tell you right now that probably at a minimum of 5 days a week, my stall will be vacant. And I understand from the mayor, he doesn't want me to put that on Craigslist and sell it. But I could probably turn that back to Alta and say, Alta, if you want to use this in a different manner, I could almost tell you when I'm going to be at the cabin. And it is a fraction of the days. The cabin owners are in a very different situation than the lodges, which can fill a slot on a nightly basis with a guest or an employee. We have very infrequent use, and I think the system needs to try and take that into account and adjust to that infrequent use, and yet the need to have more than one person there when we are there.
Can you wrap up, Del?
At the request of Jen, I will wrap up.
Sorry, I hate cutting people off, but thank you.
Del. Just getting started.
Thank you. And if you have ideas about how that could work, Del, could you send them on, please?
Chris Adams, I wasn't sure if you wanted to make a comment or not. I've just enabled you. I think you're on a phone. You might have to hit *6. Chris? Okay, we're going to move on. And then I had a couple people, let's see, join late. Tally Goodson, did you want to make a public comment or are you all set?
Hang on. Hi.
Hi, we can hear you. Thank you.
No, I would just reiterate what Dell just said, and that when we do come up there, we typically do have more than just a single car. It's not frequent. I mean, we're not there that often, but when we do come up, we do need the flexibility to have more than one car park in that space. And I'm not totally familiar with how the proposed system is supposed to work. And I realize it's the first year that this is being rolled out, but the idea of just having one car, particularly where in our cabin, we have two different sides. So we have 2 units in our cabin, and I have one side and the Eltons have the other side. And so the idea of just having one permit for that residence really would be very difficult for us. And so I do think there needs to be some additional thought put into, how to allocate those parking spaces. And I do also echo Bob's comments just a little bit, and it feels like, we're just sort of, it feels like we have been parking there for a long time, and suddenly we're subject to something that's coming out of left field that really does impose some hardships on us. So appreciate any additional thoughts or efforts that could be put into accommodating the needs of the cabin owners.
Thank you, Tally. I'm going to call on one more person. Everybody else, I believe, has told me that they do not want to make a comment. If I've missed anybody, if you can raise your hand, I'll let you speak after I ask this next person. Charlotte Pratt, you joined us, and I just wanted to double check. Oh, you raised your hand. Yeah, you're fast on it. Okay, Charlotte, you should be able to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, everyone. This is such a hot topic. It's so difficult. It's so long overdue. I want to echo Bob Pruitt. I am the financial person for our subdivision, Secret Lake Cabin Owners Association. I pay that special use permit fee every single year on behalf of our 9 cabins. The fee is very, very steep. It's gone up to $724 just in the last couple of years. I'm having a hard time understanding that we don't get some sort of rights to parking, having that special use permit, even though the permit may not qualify us for actual parking, but we do not have parking in the wintertime. Second of all, transferability is very, very critical for us. I am the representative of the Nebaker cabin. It is owned by 8 families. My parents had 8 children. We now all own it, including my father willed it to 32 grandchildren. So we have 40 members. They are all skiers. They're all avid Alta lovers. And transferability from license plate to license plate is very important to us. I want to add just one last little scenario. I come up on a weekend, on a Saturday, and I have a car full of children, and I want to park close to the Sunnyside lift. So I go down in that lot and I pay my $25 to ASL for parking. But at the end of the day, at 4 o'clock, I want to move my car to the north side of State Route 210 for overnight parking. How can I be guaranteed that I don't have to pay an additional $25 for that car when another adult member has already got my $250 permit? So something to think about of how I can move to overnight parking. Thank you for your help on this. Appreciate it. And I'm through.
Thank you, Charlotte. Mayor, that's it. Oh, Rebecca Hall actually just raised her hand. You should be able to speak, Becky.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to also just make a comment quick on this. Since John and I both live in a caretaking unit up at the Highmark House, we weren't sure. We both have a car because I work in Park City and he needs one for the house here. So yeah, again, just wasn't sure about, and also we're full-time residents. I'm sure as most of you know, we live here 365 days a year. So we're also Alta ski area pass holders, season pass holders. So just curious on our, if we are both season pass holders, we both live here year round and we have 2 cars, what that might entail for parking passes as well. So I just thought I'd chime in and I don't know, something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see that anyone else has raised their hand. So that's it, Mayor. We can move on to the next agenda.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is Mike Mon and a ski area update, but I know that Mike isn't here today, I think. Am I right about that?
I haven't seen him join yet.
Yeah, no, he told me he wasn't going to likely make the meeting, and I don't see anybody else. So from the ski area to stand in for him. So we'll have to skip that, I guess, which actually gets us back on schedule, as a matter of fact. But that's just happy circumstance, I guess. The next item then is the UFA. Jay? Chief, how are you?
You caught me off guard. Not a ton for UFA, but thanks for having us again tonight. Just wanted to go over just a few things as far as statistics for the last quarter. So quarter 3, showed a total of 13 calls in the Alta area for UFA. 2 of them were fire calls, 11 of them were emergency medical calls. Another interesting stat along with that is the number of ambulances that respond. And so we changed the way that we dispatch units into the canyon. So in addition to the 113 crew, you also have an additional ambulance. So for medical calls, you have an ambulance that's dispatched in addition to the crew from 113. And that's in an effort to keep them in service in the canyon. So we would do a couple things. If 113 responds to a medical call and it's a call where somebody needs to be transported quickly, then they would have their ambulance with them and they could just do that transport without waiting for an ambulance to respond from the valley. But what that also does is it would keep that ambulance that's responding from the valley in the canyon while the 113 crew drives down with the patient, delivers them to the hospital, and then returns. If it is a patient that maybe isn't injured or isn't needing to be transported immediately, then 113 would arrive, they would do that assessment, would start to provide care, and would get the patient ready to be received by that ambulance that's responding from the valley. So it's a little bit different than what we have done in the past. We started doing that over the winter, and I think it increases the level of service that you're receiving. So just in this quarter that we're talking about, you had 8 different ambulances respond into the Alta area that were not from 113. 6 of those 8 were from the Fort Union station that's there just below Highland Drive on Fort Union. And then 2 came from the station that was just west of there. So that these ambulances respond from the closest available resource. So on those 2 occurrences, that means that the station there on Fort Union was not available, but they were probably committed to another call. So the next closest is that station that's a little bit further west on Fort Union, just below 900 East. Wildland fire season is wrapping up. I'm hoping that it has ended here in Utah. It has certainly not ended in other parts of the West. We do have crews that are still in California. This is the time of year when Southern California starts having their severe fire season. So we do have crews that are still out. Our seasonal wildland fire crews are wrapping up their season. They are finished at the end of this week, and they did have a busy season, luckily out of state, not focused here in state. Our winter season is rapidly approaching, and we have plans in place to get together with our partners in the canyon. So both the Alta Clinic, Alta Ski Patrol, as well as the Snowbird Clinic and the Snowbird Ski Patrol, we try to do a kickoff meeting with them before the season starts, just to work out plans, talk, get to know everybody, and make sure that we're starting off on the right foot with our partners in the canyon. We're also working on a community program with all of our communities that we currently provide service to. So if you look at a uniform that is worn by Unified Fire Authority, currently patches on both shoulders say Unified Fire Authority. We would like one of those patches to identify us as a member of the community that we're currently serving. So that would be the town of Alta where you are. So our information outreach division is working on designing those patches for you to look at. I suspect it'll look really similar to the logo that you have on your website with the snowflake and the town of Alta. John has given me several examples of things that have been used in the past, and so we want it to be reflective of the community that we're working in. So that's a work in progress, and as soon as we have something to display, I'll show you that as it moves forward. A few weeks ago, I dropped off a Unified Fire Authority budget book to the town offices. If you're ever having difficulty sleeping at night, you can read through that budget book. It's a 300-page document. But honestly, that is one of the great things that our chief has done since being here, is he is a budget guy. And I've learned a ton going through the process. And if there is anything that you want to know about our organization, you can find it in that budget book. It's very descriptive and very complete. Every single dollar that's spent is accounted for in that budget book. I think that's about it for me. Any questions for me?
One thing I was going to bring up a little bit later, but I'll bring it up now since you just mentioned, you were talking about the backfilling with ambulances and you mentioned the budget, is that there is an ongoing discussion about 3-member versus 4-member crews. And as a budget item, do you know, Jay, I couldn't remember and I didn't look it up. Are there five 3-member crews or 6, is it?
So let me just count. Immigration Canyon, Big Cottonwood Canyon, Cottonwood Heights, the station on Wasatch Boulevard, 113, Copperton, and then we have one down in Eagle Mountain. So there's 6 different stations.
And then ours too, right? Magna?
No, Magna stations are
Okay.
branded.
Yeah. So just for everybody's information, there's, especially in the canyons, there's a value in having a 4-member crew because they can start fighting a fire quicker. We don't actually have all that many fires on the other hand. And so the UFA, correct me if I get this wrong, Jay, has not judged those places that Jay just mentioned as the places that most need the 4-member crews. And a 4-member crew, just for your information, adds $500,000 to the budget. And that's part of the issue is, do you increase your revenues commensurate with that, or do you keep the costs lower? Thank you, Jay. It doesn't look like we have any other questions for you. Oh, one fun thing I'll share with you is in my class that I'm teaching at the University of California at Berkeley, I have a visitor next week who is the forest supervisor of the 6 Rivers National Forest. And he's going to talk to my class about climate change and forest fires in California.
Right. I think that's
Assuming that he doesn't get called out on another big fires.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks. All right, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, the September 8th, 2021 and September 29th, 2021 council meeting minutes. Treasurer's reports and staff reports are what is on that agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I did have a question or comment and potentially an amendment, which relates to the second minutes that we, I believe, saw for the first time. They were not sent to us originally for discussion, and that was the September 29 minutes. And on page 12 of the consent agenda, item number 6, this had to do with the new business that you raised at that meeting. And I would move to strike the second paragraph, which is a single sentence, and instead replace it with, he also stated Roger Burke is running unopposed for mayor and also serves on the planning commission. Mayor Sondak intends to send the council resumes of a couple of people who have expressed interest in serving. I think the sentence that I'm asking that we strike, or as part of my motion to strike, was not accurately reflecting what was stated in that meeting as I've listened to the SoundCloud again.
I would just suggest that Piper, the minutes are what was said was what was said. It's never what we want to have said. So I would just recommend that you direct Piper to listen to it again, and based on the actual recording, that she can amend it.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Yeah, that's fine with me because that was the basis for my motion to amend was what I
Right.
heard on the sound clip.
Okay.
Could the council vote on the consent agenda without those minutes from September 29th? Margaret, could you send me your suggested language and I'll bring it up in the next consent agenda?
I'd be happy to.
Great.
Okay, so what I guess, Margaret, I would say that you want to amend the motion to exclude the minutes from September 29th and postpone the approval of those minutes to a future meeting.
Excellently stated. Yes.
Okay, I'll second Margaret's motion to amend. Any further discussion? Okay, Cliff, did you want to say something or are you just getting ready to vote?
Just can't wait to vote.
Okay, so all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so now let's go back to the motion that was amended, which is to approve the consent agenda for September 8th, 2021, treasurer's reports and staff reports. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda are questions regarding the departmental reports. Does anybody have such? Okay, I am not hearing any, so I'm gonna move
Sorry.
to.
I'm late, sorry. I thought that there was a reference, Jen, in the report about pathways being on schedule, and I thought that they were going to report this month on where we were on that.
Yeah, in my staff report in the consent agenda, I had reported that we took a little bit longer on the case statement that we had originally planned. So we are behind schedule now. And so they're planning on doing some preliminary findings at the next town council meeting, but not getting us a final report until the end of November.
Good. Thanks for catching that, Margaret. Okay, the next item on the agenda is discussion and possible action to adopt resolution 2021 R18, a resolution repealing and replacing the fee schedule to include now parking permit fees.
Excuse me, Mayor. I'd like to once again disclose my conflict of interest because I work at Alpha Lodge.
Okay, so noted. Thank you. All right. Is there a motion to adopt that resolution?
So moved.
So move. Second.
Okay, so discussion.
Mayor, may I pose a staff question?
Yeah, and Jen, maybe you should share the resolution, please.
You bet.
Mike.
Not having seen the document, I was concerned that we correctly address the permit violation fee at $75, and then it doubles if not paid within 10 days. And I'm not sure if that's accurately reflected in what's before you.
Okay,
Yeah,
we
it's
don't have-
only the $75 for the violation is in there. So we should put, if we're going to impose the double, I guess it would be either appealed or not paid, right?
Yeah, so if it just flatly goes unpaid for a period of 10 days and the person does not appeal it within those 10 days, there's a doubling of the fine. And that's something that the interstate does standardly to cover their collection costs.
And I'll add that they don't end up doing that very often.
No, it's pretty rare. They're highly geared towards, service as opposed to enforcement.
Right. But they did explain they explained at length why their costs go up quite a bit. And is the, where in this document does,
It's, the fee schedule is a different document.
yeah, yeah.
You want me
yeah,
to pull
that's-
that up?
Why don't
Yeah,
you pull up the section,
Yep.
Jen, that has the new language in it?
yeah, and I've got it up too, if you would prefer.
Right there.
Okay.
Wonderful.
So we need to amend this proposal, this resolution and the motion that's on the table to include another line under the town managed parking permits. Is that what I understood Mike to be getting at, Polly?
Yes, and I would recommend that it state parking permit violation fee if not paid within 10 days, if not paid or appealed within 10 days, $150.
Okay. So I'll move to amend the motion that's on the table to include the line that Polly just stated.
Seconded.
Okay.
I just had a question. I thought the motion had to do with the resolution versus the fee schedule itself, but I guess the fee schedule is to be an attachment to it, and that's why we're dealing with both of them simultaneously.
Yeah, that's right. It's the fee schedule is, the resolution is to adopt the fee schedule.
Okay, because part of the question that I had about the resolution itself was the first, whereas the town manages public parking in Alta, and I guess I'm wondering if we should potentially reduce that to say some public parking, because I don't think we manage all public parking in Alta and don't want that liability or responsibility to suggest that that's our responsibility to manage all public parking in Alta.
I think Polly and Mike, you may want to weigh in on this. On the one hand, what Margaret says on the face of it seems right. On the other hand, if we were to say that, I'm a little concerned that we are taking a position to identify parking managed by others as public parking when maybe we don't want to do that necessarily. And I say that specifically because one of the issues that's really important is that the town's police services can only be used where the public has access. And so I think we want to not pre-identify areas that we don't manage as necessarily being public access. Does that make sense, Polly, what I just said?
Yeah, I don't, but I can, I don't see a problem legally by just saying the town of Alta manages some public parking in Alta.
Okay. As opposed to some of the public parking, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, maybe another way to say it is, that areas exist within a town where the town has a statutory or, contractual authority to manage parking.
Yeah, I don't think that we're incurring any liability by saying it how either way is fine.
Okay, so we've got a motion to amend to include a line about penalties. Let's deal with that one, and then we'll come back on the fee schedule. And then Margaret, let's change this first whereas. Does that work?
Yes, the other thing I wanted to note about the adding the fee schedule itself and that additional or fourth line talking about doubling the violation fee is I wonder if, it looks like we've taken that $75 directly from the lift company's similar charge for that kind of violation, but I'm wondering if sometimes we have I don't know if it's a sliding scale, but we have, for first offense, it's this much, for second offense, it's this much. Do we want, or is there a reason, or should we actually have the penalty be greater if somebody is repeatedly violating, is the question.
Mike, I'm going to let you weigh in on that and reflecting your conversations with Interstate and the ski area.
You know, I think our existing parking violations that we handle through the Justice Court, I think that the fines tend to be in the $35 to $50 range. $75 seems attention getting to me. You know, it is true that the higher the fine, you know, the more of the deterrent. But, you know, I'm comfortable with going with the 75 and the doubling for, you know, non-payment in our first touch, which would give us an opportunity to really monitor compliance and come back to you with an intelligent opinion on whether we need to be more aggressive.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
So before we call the question on the motion to amend, I wonder, Jen, are you sharing your screen? I wonder if we could go back to the fee schedule for a moment. And depending on the answer to this, it might lead to a motion to amend. I have a question that I don't readily see an answer to here. If the kind of the third level is $150 for failure to pay or appeal, so then does that person owe 150, 225, or 250?
Well, the way that I crafted the language, they would owe 150. So I don't know, Jen, if you want to read it back, but I think so the next line would be a parking violation not paid within 10 days, with not paid or appealed within 10 days will be $150.
And in my conversations with Interstate, I understand the 150 to be the max that they would be seeking, you know, in a parking fine collection. And as a reminder, the ordinance passed last month allows that those type of violations be handled in a civil arena as opposed to through our justice court. So that process will be managed by Interstate.
Cool. Sounds good to me. As long as we know what we're doing.
I can put I have the language as Polly just stated it, and I can put a clarification or a note, a footer on there, just, you know, explaining the situation in more detail, just so that somebody would know that it would be the 150 and not the 225 as you asked. I can try and make that really clear.
Yeah, and just for the council's awareness, you know, one of the goals we've had through this whole thing is, you know, to create a single point of information for parking in Alta. So Interstate is going to be developing a website, you know, with interactive maps saying where to park and what, you know, area requires a permit versus a reservation. And then they've also got a link to a page that walks people through the ticketing and appeal process.
Okay, so what's before us at the moment is the motion to amend to include the $150 line. All those in favor to amend the parking fee, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Now, Margaret.
But before we go to that other point, I had a question also about the fee, but I wanted to deal with that first. In the seasonal permit, we talk about that italics provision about the seasonal permits are allocated by the mayor. I'm wondering, and I know we had a discussion about this before, I'm wondering if we could specifically reference the Fair and Peers study as the basis for that allocation, rather than just, as we found today, that those numbers were different this week than they were apparently last week when they did the study. And I think there's anxiety on a number of user groups about these numbers changing yet again in the next couple weeks. And all of a sudden there's less in one category and more in another. And so the question was, instead of just saying a seasonal permit allocated by the mayor, could we have some language based upon the Fair and Peers study in table 1 as amended today, if we decide we want to amend it, but because those provisions are different than even what's in the study, in reference what you were talking about earlier in the spreadsheet that you did. I don't know.
I think we need to compare, we need to make sure we have the right numbers. And I'm a little worried that any reference to a specific table or a specific study we have to make sure we have the right numbers. I would certainly be comfortable saying that it should reflect the categories, but I don't think we know exactly how many, like your number of, I'm going to ask Chris to confer with you and take a look at your list and compare it to the list he worked up, for example, of units in in town. So I want to be careful not to tie us too specifically.
Yeah,
Polly,
could I
do you-
suggest?
Yeah.
I mean, the ordinance that was passed that allowed for this parking permit and parking fees delegated to the mayor this ability to set the permits and set how they're allocated. So this is consistent with that. I think that, if the council feels that the mayor isn't being, not being transparent on how it's being done, obviously it's allocated in a means that, at least the town is trying to be as transparent as possible as to how we're getting to these numbers, then the council could always change that provision in the code or ask for something else. But I think the point of this, and
why is the italics even here then?
it actually probably doesn't need to be. I think it was just to try to give information to people.
I think I appreciate Councilwoman Burke's effort. If I understood you correctly, Margaret, you're actually trying to say, hey, we're not pulling these numbers out of thin air. This is tied to this study. But I fully respect Mayor Sundek's your statement about not wanting to tie us down at the same time, since this is a moving target. I just think to give assurances to people that we're doing our very best to look at this based on at least the starting point. And I'm not sure how to articulate that well. If I've understood your point, Margaret.
Yeah, I think you have, and I think Harris and Paula, you have as well. And so the transparency is essential, but again, because we had this study that everybody is working on as fast and as intelligently and as thoroughly and as they can, and yet the numbers change over the course of 5 days and may likely change again. I want to be able to assure everybody in the town, as I'm sure all of you do as well, that it is being considered and that these numbers are not just approximations, but are actually based upon facts on the ground.
I think the issue that the tension that exists, of course, is being able to pivot and being nimble with being able to understand exactly where those numbers are coming from. Maybe what would be helpful is the mayor, letting the council know exactly what the basis is and working with everyone to try to get to those numbers. But I don't think that you want to have any anything tied down without changing that code section. And maybe that's what you want to do, is change that code section. But then then you're hampered by the fact that you can't change the numbers quickly. So if the Fair and Peers study is wrong, or they had some wrong data, then you're not going to be able to do that very quickly. It'll, unless you have a special meeting.
Well, I think I'm pretty, maybe you don't agree with this, but I don't usually just make stuff up. So, it's going to be based on my best assessment of the facts.
Well,
Yeah.
for what it's worth, I'll give you a staff commitment right now that, we, at least through the police department, intend to keep everybody abreast of changes as they're contemplated and as they occur. So everybody knows we're not making buddy deals, and you have the right amount of thoughts going into our recommendations to the mayor.
Yeah.
Cliff, I'm sorry.
Between Harris, Mike, Chris, Fair and Peers, this is the process that was authorized by the ordinance that was passed last month. And actually, there was an effort to bring in town council advice and consent, and that was not passed.
And I think the minutes will reflect the transparency to the public, and the minutes will reflect that the numbers are, that the process comes from the Fair and Peers study, and that the numbers, as Mike and Harris have said, they'll be allocated correctly to the best of our ability.
And the allocation problem is a little bit of a different one than what we're asking for right this minute. But Chris has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out or inform the council that so we have this. We're under contract with Fair and Peers. They've done work to help us survey, town of Alta parking users, crunch that data, and then come up with these a way to think about allocation and some other recommendations. And a part of what is to come in that contract with Fair and Peers is some help with program evaluation. So whether we'll need their help to understand the strengths and weaknesses of whatever the final program we roll out is, or whether it's going to be painfully obvious, I'm not sure, but we'll at least have some help. We should at least have some help from them collecting data, making observations on, peak days, peak evenings, peak periods, et cetera. So look forward to that. And, I think we've always acknowledged that there's a high likelihood that the way that we set out to manage parking this winter in Alta on both sides of the road is subject to change based on how it goes. So I just wanted to offer that.
Okay, can we vote on the amendment before us? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Sorry, could you restate the amendment? I got lost.
That we're adding the fourth line for 150.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, I don't think there's any opposed. Okay, now the next thing is we should go to the resolution language. And as I understood you, Margaret, you wanted to change the first whereas to include the statement, whereas the town of Alta manages some public parking in Alta. That is, add the word some.
Correct.
Okay, I'll second that. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of that amendment, please say aye.
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 Okay, so now we're in the position of voting on the resolution, which makes reference to the fee schedule. We do have a motion. This main motion is on the table. It was made and seconded. I don't recall by whom, but I know it was. All right, discussion about that. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, good. Then we have adopted Resolution 2021 R18. Thank you, everybody. And we will be back in touch with more details. Elise, we kept you a little bit longer than I told you this agenda item would be present. And
That's
I know that you have pressing family business. Please give our best wishes to Jonathan and the rest of your family there.
I will. Thank you. I'll sign off now.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay, so we already talked about the wages. Is there further discussion that we want to have now, or is there actually an action we want to take now? I wasn't sure whether or not how in depth we would get in that earlier conversation. If you want a proposal, I would make one, but we can also wait until a future meeting and look at more comparative data than what we've already heard about.
I'd love to act swiftly, but I'd love to see some more data if we could.
Sheridan, I'm not sure which of those two things you want to do right now.
I need a little more data for my end, for my comfort level, to be able to act on. I'd like to see maybe the proposal fleshed out a little bit more with comparatives to see where we're at in terms of increasing salaries, which I am.
Okay. Cliff, Margaret, you want to say anything about this?
Yep, that sounds like the right approach.
Okay.
I concur.
Okay, so Mike and maybe John, I'll ask you to prepare a staff report and that shows comparative data, and then as part of that preparation, we'll talk and we'll bring to the town council a concrete proposal. How's that sound?
Count on us.
Wait, one question I had, and this obviously is a confidential communication you had, Harris, with one of the deputies who was considering going somewhere else. So I don't know if that individual expressed the reason, the justification was because of lack of compensation and benefits, or if it was the stress of handling the situation in Alta or not. And so whether it would be appropriate for you or Mike to communicate with this individual, what would it take for them to stay? I don't know how these things come about or whether that would be appropriate.
You can count on that communication happening. And just generally speaking, see all of the above. It's a challenging time for most officers. If you've read the news in the last 2 years, you know that we're operating in a different environment. We thankfully haven't seen the protests and, honestly, all the garbage that's occurred in some other communities. But what we have seen is a sentiment from people that visit and recreate in Alta that's been really quite challenging. We're mitigating more disputes than we ever conceived we would have been. We're all at our threshold with the humans, and maybe they are with us as well. But we still want to do a quality job, but it's stressful. It's on everybody's mind. How much longer can I do this?
Yeah, I think, Margaret, it's probably there's not a single factor, like Mike was saying. I'm sure that the support expressed in this meeting today will be conveyed, and I have confidence that it's certainly moving in the right direction from an individual's point of view, it seems to me.
And I got to say thank you to all of you for your kind comments. That means the absolute world to me and our crew.
Yeah, and the incident that Don Page was referring to is one that I was aware of and just want to make sure that, Mike, you know that you should, that we all want you to take care of yourself after a situation like that. And I know it's not, I'm not sure how you do that job. I had a hard enough time dealing with a student who was crying in a conversation with me because he hadn't handed in his midterm. So it's a whole different level.
It's easier than parking.
Well, you see, that's the problem, Margaret, is we're going to, with the parking, that's going to be a countervailing force to this, you know, any increase in wages. We may have to offer them free trips to Cancun or something. I don't know.
You're going to have to get me some therapy when we're all done with this.
It should be happening now. Seriously.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I don't actually off the top of my head know what our mental health benefits are, but the health insurance ought to be used for those purposes.
Yeah, I'm being facetious.
Hey, you know what isn't on this agenda? Can I make a mayor's report? I don't know if that was a conspiracy, Jen.
That could be new business.
I thought of it earlier and then I didn't want to interrupt you and then it.
I know, I forgot. I didn't even notice. I actually wrote some things down. And we also need, before we adjourn, we need to, at the end of the mayor's report, there needs to be a report on the dogs by our code. And so Jen is going to do that. So let me, since I still have 5 minutes left on the agenda. So, and our agenda was short. So let me say a few things. COVID is, we're at 38 per 100,000 in Salt Lake County, which is better than it's been recently. It's still above the United States average. There is plenty of concern for the winter. 57% of Americans have been vaccinated, which means that plenty have not. As I reported in a letter that I'm going to say something about in a minute to the town's businesses, a couple of weeks ago, my previous guest in my class in California was the chief epidemiologist of the state of California, Dr. Erica Pond, and she concluded her presentation by saying, get vaccinated or get the Delta variant. That's your choice. I want to thank Sarah Gibbs for making the hard decisions to keep our community safe as safe as possible. I know that was not an easy decision that she recently made to require vaccination to come to ACE events. So this is our last meeting before the upcoming election on October 9th at 6 p.m. There is a Meet the Candidates night sponsored by ACE. It's available online too, but you can't pose a question online is my understanding. And since that's an ACE event, I imagine that we'll be having to, I'm sure we'll be having to comply with the new ACE COVID protocols. Recently, Chris can weigh in on this if he wants to say the number. I don't have it off the top of my head, but our census numbers have gone down. We're still trying to investigate whether or not those are good numbers. So this is going to likely affect some of our funding distributions and the decision-making input that we have in situations where population is part of those formulae. Sooner or later, there's going to have to be a reckoning on the dog ordinance numbers because the town council decided a couple of years ago to continue tying the license numbers to our census. And now we have a new census. I brought up the issues with the UFA on the firefighters expense. So I've already talked about that. And then I've already talked about the Council of Mayors on Thursday, the September 23rd, focused on homelessness and police wages. So I just want to reflect on the letter that I wrote to the business owners recently. And I said to them that I would be making a request at this meeting. And the request is this. I would hope that all the businesses in Alta require their employees to be vaccinated. And I'd even go further than that and say that the lodging and dining businesses, my request is that they require their guests to be vaccinated as well. This came up in a conversation with one of our guest services management company principals, and we were talking about the blackjack. I don't know what action, if any, the homeowners association took, because I haven't kept up on that on the recent meeting, but I suggested to the homeowners association of blackjack that we again take short-term rentals into blackjack, but only for people who are vaccinated. I know that there are people who will resist this, and I referred to a Salt Lake Tribune article about Congressman Chris Stewart's claim that he will not be attending any Utah Jazz games for the rest of the season. So some people will resist, but I think that we also have a real marketing opportunity to be a place where people can come and gather with their friends. Our lodges have a lot of repeat business, and people like to come at certain times of the year because they see other families who have also come at that time of the year. And I know that some of our lodges have required their employees to be vaccinated, and I applaud that. But I hope that that we can move forward and be the place where people can come and feel comfortable, and we can use that as a marketing advantage. Okay, Jen, you want to say something about the dog licenses, because I failed to communicate with you earlier about that, and I know you have it at your fingertips.
I do have it at my fingertips, and I failed to send it to you, so my fault on that. Temporary licenses that were issued with a start date between September 7th and October 12th are Marcia Decker for 30 days starting on September 8th. Brian Jones 1 day on September 14th. Katie, I'm going to botch your last name, I apologize, Shigioka for 8 days on starting on October 2nd. And Kathy Moore, 8 days starting on October 9th. And I did want to make a correction. In last month's report, I failed to list Marco Young for 8 days starting on August 25th. So just wanted to correct that from last month's report.
Okay, thank you. Let me say something about upcoming meetings of potential public interest. On October 19th at 7:30, the UFA and then the UFSA boards meet. On October 28th, there's a Council of Mayors meeting only in person. They've decided to make them in-person meetings at Cottonwood Heights at 11:30. November 1st at 2:30 is a UFSA Finance Committee meeting that I will be chairing. And then immediately following that at 3:30 is a CWC board meeting. November 5th is a CWC board retreat that begins at 9 o'clock and I think is scheduled for most of the day. And then we have a town council meeting on November 10th. Okay. Remaining items on our agenda are new business and then a motion to adjourn. I've already talked about the new business of the police wages, so I'll be back in touch with you about that. Anything? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sorry, just before we do that, it relates to the parking issue. Is it possible for council to get copies of the MOUs or other contracts once they're in final form, just so that we have them, or will they be posted on the website, or what might we be informed of that?
Polly, I think you should offer an opinion on what we ought to do there, please.
My understanding was that we were going to bring an MOU to the council at the next meeting. So not only will you get to see it, but you will get to review it and vote on it.
And that's even though it goes into effect on before that meeting. Because I thought our ordinance says November 1st. was when all this stuff starts to happen.
Well, yeah, it's kind of a, there won't be too much enforcement on November 1st is my guess. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
But
Yeah, I don't think the ski area is expecting to enforce before they open. Although maybe they'll open on November 1st,
it looks like it, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, I'll second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a